Um, so it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Vladimir Dragalin from Janssen, which is now the Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine for this year's ASA Winter Lecture. Dr. Dragalin is the Vice President and Scientific Fellow at Janssen, and he is a world-renowned expert on adaptive design with over a dozen years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Dragalin is fellow of the ASA, member of the Drug Information Association, the Society for Clinical Trials, the International Society for CNS Clinical Trials and Methodology, and he also serves as an associate editor for the Journal of Biopharmaceutical Statistics. His works have revolutionarily changed the pharmaceutical industry and impacted our daily lives. So today, Vladimir would like to tell us about simulation-guided clinical trial design. So, Vladimir.
Thank you very much, Dean. Yes, go ahead, please. Somebody was trying to say something. Okay, I was hoping to say the same good words like Ting. Thank you very much for invitation. I think that this time is we are online. I remember very well some years ago, I visited the University of Georgia and I received a gift. So that's the beauty of being face-to-face, not online. So
I have the same cup.
You have the same cup, yes, well, good. So here is the brief agenda of my presentation outline. I will provide the general principles and key steps for the simulation-guided design in clinical trials. I will briefly introduce, with no intention of advertisement, Solara platform, something that we are using internally at Johnson & Johnson, and then I illustrate how this type of framework can be applied into a case study. And we run exactly end-to-end, going through the development of the design for a given trial using this platform. So what is a simulation-guided design? So usually we simulate the behavior of various design options to explore the trial performance in silico. Probably you heard about in silico in many, many areas, but in pharmaceutical industry, we are using in silico to simulate the performance of different designs, not how the disease progresses or something like that. That is also something important, but my focus is on the using in silico in order to evaluate, compare and contrast different options for clinical trials. So the underlying methodology involves very complex mathematical calculations. Most of them are numerical integration, Markov chain Monte Carlo. But this kind of exercise is worthwhile because allows us fully to vet the design and challenging assumptions at the planning stage of a clinical trial. So this is a schematic of how these simulations are created. So we start in the upper left corner, simulating virtual subjects. In a sense, we simulate the potential response on primary endpoint or primary and several other key secondary endpoints of the subjects on different doses of the drug or on the drug and placebo or drug and active control. We may also simulate some execution variables. That means what would be the enrollment of the subjects. We can model that through different levels of sophistication. Probably the most complex one is this so-called Poisson gamma process of enrolling subjects. We can also simulate different dropout patterns in the patients which will be enrolled. Having that, then we can allow the design. Usually the design is planned in several stages. From stage to stage, we call it interim analysis. So at the beginning, we allow the patients to come in first cohort, let's say. Then we have the first analysis, looking at the primary endpoint or other secondary endpoints, which are supposed to kind of guide the performance of the design or maybe to adjust the design. So based on those analysis, we then apply some adaptive decision rules. Those may be stopping early at that stage because we accumulated enough data or enough information and we can make a conclusion. Conclusion might be to stop for futility. It may be even stop for harm because the new treatment is worse than, let's say, active control. You don't need to keep enrolling new subjects in order to harm them. But sometimes it's also possible to stop early for success because you already have evidence that the experimental treatment is better than control. If that is not the case, then the study continues. And usually what is implemented, then you may revise allocation rules. So how the patients, new patients will be allocated to different treatment arms. You have several doses. It may be that you switch from 1 to 1 to 1 to, let's say, more on a very well-performing dose. You can put some, let's say, selection of the subpopulation rules at that point in time, and many other, or increasing the total number of subjects. And after that, in this kind of design engine, you continue accrual of new subjects. And again, accruing new subjects, applying these execution variables, you come to the next interim analysis. And again, you repeat this analysis of available data, adaptive decisions, and so on. So this cycle continue either up to the first time when it will be a recommendation to stop the study for any of those reasons that I mentioned, or you reach the total number of subjects that was pre-planned. And at that time, now you don't have an opportunity to keep enrolling subjects or accrual. You have to make the final decision for that study. So that is, roughly speaking, you have to program the simulation of one such kind of a trial. Now, but that's not the end of it, because in order to evaluate how good that design is, you need to repeat this process many, many, many times. Sometimes 10,000 times, sometimes 100,000 times, or even a million. And now averaging the performance of the design at each of this kind of repetition then can give us operating characteristics of the design. So that is what simulation guided design of or planning of the experiments in clinical trials is all about. So it's not an analytical solution, it's through simulation you evaluate operating characteristics of one design or another. You can then create different options of the design, and through the same kind of framework you can compare and contrast the different designs. So roughly speaking, we come up with a scenario analysis of different design options. So you can create design 1, design 2, design 3, and so on. Or let's say design is almost the same, but you change some of these decision rules, and then we'll create new versions of the design. But also you need to simulate those patients, like I mentioned at the beginning, under different assumptions. What is perhaps there is no treatment effect. That would be one assumption, or sometimes we call one scenario, null scenario, or under different treatment effects, value, and so on. So this sometimes people are calling sensitivity analysis, but probably sensitivity is towards the main assumptions. How robust is the performance of the design when you go away from what was believed to be the treatment effect, for example, what was believed to be the enrollment profile and dropouts and so on. So you create these different variations of scenarios, and then the problem would, the objective will be to now simulate the data according to those scenarios and apply the data or those scenarios on different design options. So with that, we can measure the design operating characteristic, but also something which is not statistically related, but is more like that this would stimulate scientific dialogue between designer of the clinical trial and other members of the clinical team, clinical development team, which will be, you need the clinical expertise, what scenarios are believable, real, which one are very extreme. And of course, you shouldn't ignore very extreme scenarios, because you want to guarantee that under all circumstances, or majority of circumstances, the design will operate as is intended, or what as is expected. So the designs, options, and the critical assumptions are then get thoroughly vetted through many, many millions of simulations. But then after we come up with a best design, or the most appropriate design, roughly speaking, we will do one more simulation, but that will be now real. So you will run the same design that it was picked up to be the most appropriate, and then that design will be then implemented, and the decision rules and adaptation rules will be applied to the real data in a clinical trial. So what are then the steps to build the so-called complex adaptive designs? Because if the design is very simple, let's say two-arm parallel group design, you have one primary endpoint, the planning of that clinical trial will be very straightforward. You don't need simulation, because you can even analytically calculate what will be the power and maybe some other characteristics, type 1 error, and so on. But imagine that you have type of design that I described in that diagram, when you have opportunity to change allocation, you may have an opportunity to monitor the number of interim analysis, the frequency of interim analysis, and so on. You can understand that very easily you go away from the comfort zone of doing everything analytically. And you have to rely then on this simulation guided planning of the clinical trials. And this will be good from the start to first work with the clinical team and think about, but what is the decision problem that we want to address or answer with these clinical trials? What role does this study play in the overall clinical development? Probably for those who are familiar with drug development know that we are usually run several phases of the drug development, starting phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and so on. So if you are asked to design a, let's say, phase 2 study, it's good to know what will come after that. What will be the objective of that phase 2 study? Is not a mini phase 3 study, has different objectives, and then a different appropriate design will be the most or the best choice for the design. You have to define what constitutes a failed trial and what constitutes a successful trial, because that will then help us to look at the so-called operating characteristics. How many times the design was saying that trial is successful when we simulated data from a non-efficacious drug. That will be type 1 error control if you want to use the hypothesis testing framework. And also, how many times, if the drug is has a potential, you claim the trial failed. That would be kind of type 2 errors. Or if you look differently, how many times under that scenario you said the trial was successful? That would be an equivalent of power in hypothesis testing. In drug development, I think the hypothesis testing is a good framework to set up the clinical question, clinical objective in a statistical terms. But unfortunately, the situation in clinical trials is much, much more complicated that you will be able to just transfer or translate all those complicated objectives into just a simple test of hypothesis. So that is why you need this type of framework that is needed. So then you have to focus from the very beginning, what uncertainties are there around the treatment? Do I know what is the dose, duration, frequency of, let's say, providing the treatment to the patient or the participant? What is the population that you would like to evaluate? What endpoints or estimates will be used in order to evaluate the design? And what is then effect size, safety concern, marketing issues, and so on? You can see that there are a lot of kind of parameters, if you want to call them parameters, that should be taken into consideration when we are planning a clinical trial and setting up a simulation framework in order to evaluate these different objectives, different options, sorry. The next step is to create so-called skeleton. So you don't need from the very beginning to write a program or set up a lot of assumptions and a lot of options. It's good to start with something very kind of, this is called skeleton. And then after you quickly screen different design options, which show that on this skeleton framework, they are losers, you focus on the designs which are good for competition. And then you expand now either some fine tunings of the decision rules of those designs, or focusing on efficiency, additional efficiency, or you simulate those designs under a much more wider set of simulation scenarios, okay? And then, of course, you have to entertain the dialogue of this type of simulation results as a statistician, for example, with the clinical team. They will have to see what are pro, cons, and very rarely we will be able in the evaluation of different clinical trial design to find one overall optimal design. And I will illustrate in the case study how usually you deal with that, because it's a multi-criterial optimization problem in a sense, not just one simple statistical problem. So, and of course, you have to look in the running even the trial under single simulation scenarios to share with the clinical team that they will watch. If that will be observed, this is what this design is telling me that has to be recommended. Do you agree or not? Sometimes that type of walking through a single trial implementation is very helpful, because although at the planning stage they gave you some kind of ideas about assumptions, and you as a designer came up with a design, probably you miss some of the extremes or something that performance of that design will go in opposite direction. Having that check of your partners in the clinical team is very, very important. So again, simulation guided, but not only to look at the operating characteristics, but also for looking what is the outcome, what is the potential behavior of the design in a single trial. So after that, of course, you have to go through, after you set up skeleton, usually in our SOPs, we call, you have to come up with a simulation plan for simulation guided evaluation of different design. You then create simulations, this example trial that I just mentioned, but also focus on many, many simulations, millions of repetitions when you have to evaluate with high accuracy operating characteristics. And then, of course, you go in circles, like in a sense, update the design, maybe new objectives came up after the initial discussion on the skeleton, new uncertainty have been kind of put forward, and then you repeat the simulation. And through this kind of repeated or recycle type of engagement with the team, you will converge to a design. Then the next step is to write up final operating characteristic of the selected design, and that usually goes into a document which we call simulation report. This is something different from what is clinical trial protocol and what is statistical analysis plan. You'll have to create the simulation report. Okay, so let me now show state of the art, if you like, how now in industry, but I know that even in academic clinical trials, people are moving in this direction if they want to implement some of this type of more complex designs, which are not supposed to be answering just one question, but multitude of questions. And that is a product, Solara is called, is developed by Cytel, and this is their logo here. And just briefly going through what is the difference in Solara from previous type of software or tools that were available in order to do this. So is a platform runs simulations on the cloud, on Amazon cloud. You can imagine the computational power is probably by 100,000, if not more, than your power of one laptop. So you get the luxury of creating at once many simulation scenario. In this heat map illustration here, which is an output of Solara, each scenario is one column in this heat map. And each row, you can see that there are so many small lines. That is a design option that you can set up different variation of the different versions of the design with one interim, two interim, stopping for fertility, not stopping for fertility, stopping for efficacy or not, and so on. You can imagine you can be very, you want to explore a very vast space of design options, and you set them up at the beginning, and then after a push of a button, all this is submitted to the cloud with this high performance computing, and you can get 50 million simulated trials in probably about 1 hour maximum. If you can imagine that you will be trying to take this task with your laptop, it will take probably for ages. And this is what this new framework is giving us. First of all, you know for sure that you explored the very vast space of design options so that you will not miss what might be the best design, hidden probably in only if I have 1 or 2, 3 design options. That's one. Second one, you explore a very wide space of what-if situation. So you will be convinced as a result of this simulation run that you explore the performance of the design under different possible scenarios. So that is what Solara is all about. And it has already implemented in Solara many of the design, let's say group sequential design, sample size estimation design. These are like kind of initial adaptive design elements that can be incorporated in a clinical trial. They are moving now into population enrichment design, selection of the different treatment arms design, and so on. So it's a development in progress. We partner with them, and they are software developers. We are providing them some guidance of what are the challenging problems in drug development, and they then take the lead in improving their software. So I recommend you just to look maybe at Cytel to see more details about Solara. They are coming in January to Solara 2.0, but I will stop here and I will not give more advertisements of this one because I want to illustrate now you how we use this type of software, platform in order to develop our clinical trials designs. On this slide, I think is illustrating that Solara is not just a statistical tool for simulation of clinical trials. We can have a lot of R packages. There are even standalone packages in before, but it is kind of a platform to enhance collaboration between different members of a clinical development team. On this one, I am enumerating, of course, biostatistics is one function. That's the role of my group that is participating in designing the study. But of course, we rely very much on the clinical. Clinical can come with their own objectives that they want to be explored, evaluated in this simulation. You can go here on the left. You can see global development feasibility. This is a group in our company, but in many pharmaceutical companies, they are responsible for enrollment of the subjects, enrollment of the centers, what will be the rate of enrollment, do you have an opportunity to moderate the enrollment, and so on. Of course, some inputs from commercial finance is also important, especially if we want to go away from evaluating different designs just on statistical ground, but on some metrics like the expected net present value, probability of operational success, and so on and so forth. So let me now move into the remaining of the presentation on this case study. I'm not allowed to disclose this experimental drug because now we are running a phase 3 study exactly with this experimental drug. And I am sharing with you the work was done before the team was considering the different design options for this clinical trial. So what are the challenges? This experimental drug is a high value for J&J asset and is in a highly complex and competitive environment. So we need to take into consideration when we design the study, not only to have a successful trial, so that will be measured by what is the power of the trial, but to take care about, will we be first on the market with in this indication? What will be the patent life that will be left from the time when we will get approval? Because that's where the revenue is coming from. And sometimes just chasing a high power might not be the best kind of option in order to deal with all of those. And I will illustrate numerically how that comes. So we relied on the Solara, and we built in-house kind of a platform. We called it Do It, Design Optimization and Integrated Trial Platform. And so is bringing all these members of the team in this cross-disciplinary evaluation of different design options. The outcome is that we can have evaluated more than 10,000 trial designs in a very kind of thorough framework. It's not just I run one and then I don't like it and I run another one. Like I explained, is a very upfront exploration of a wide space of design options, and you pressure test them on the wide set of possible scenarios. So impact of this type of exercise is understanding, identification, and selection of novel and holistically assessed adaptive design with yearly stopping for efficacy, futility, and sample size estimation. That was our objective. So this is kind of a screenshot from the kind of how you operate with Solara. So you can see here on the left, this is the main menu. You have to create different plans. You have to enumerate what are the design. And you can see here that in this final evaluation, we went through many, many iterations. We started with many modules, and then we narrow down. And you can see here that in this simulation that I will show you, we have already about 200 models, different combination. And you see that we looked at group sequential design with 2 interim and having a futility. We look at sample size estimation with futility. You do group sequential design, but 1 interim only. And that interim has only futility. If the drug doesn't work, we don't want to spend a lot of resources, especially because we are after very competitive treatment effect. So that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not just interested in showing the drug works and is better than placebo. I want to achieve good performance in competition because we know the landscape. So this is why this is an appropriate type of design, group sequential design, that you don't want to stop for success, but just avoid sparing the resources, stopping for futility. Another one was what if we take the risk and go to the end, not stopping for futility. And then other version here where you look also to stop early, probably even for success. This one will be appropriate only when you plan with a very high number of subjects, probably focusing on a pessimistic treatment effect, but then you have to build an interim analysis close to the, let's say, required number of subjects that will guarantee you good power if the treatment effect is good enough. So you can see that easily you go through this type of different potential design options that can be appropriate for your problem. And then next one, you have to set up those scenario of the patients, right? Response. And in this case, is overall survival is a primary endpoint. We have to model also dropout rate. That's another one. And of course, here you can see that easily you can create a lot of options for overall survival. I fix here control rate, which is very small, but then I can see, I want to simulate at once, not only one hazard ratio, let's say 0.7, but a grid of some of hazard ratio. So this is how you do it in Solara. By comma separated, you can create a lot of alternative roughly speaking, response scenarios. And then, of course, you can model enrollment. I don't have a screenshot for that one, but you can simulate under different enrollment profiles, see the performance of the design. If enrollment is very fast, you might not have enough time to implement too many interim analyses, right? So that's in this head-to-head comparison of different design is good to simulate under, let's say, slow enrollment, base enrollment, and fast enrollment. Cost per patient, cost per center can be included, and that will then become an operating characteristics of the design, so that we compare different design under different assumptions on the cost of the study. Revenue is something new that Solara implemented, and that is more like related not so much to power, study duration, number of subjects, but what is the expected net present value of a given design in comparison with other designs. And you can easily see here that you need input from our financial colleagues, because they have to tell us usually what will be the regulatory review period, because your net present value will depend, will impact very much how fast you will get approval, how many years it will you will be left in order to have what is called the time to patent expiring in years. You probably know the financial aspects of drug development. You can have what will be the peak value or peak market value if you will be successful, but you can model that as well, not just one. If you will end up with very promising hazard ratio, you can say, okay, I want to simulate that in that case, I will get 100% of the market, because definitely I will be the winner. If I get only hazard ratio between 82% and 87%, probably I will get only 50% of the market. All these numbers are given to the designer, those who will set up the simulation, by our financial department. And of course, you can create many of the scenarios, and then you will see what will be the performance on the different, let's say, what is total market value. If what is not 485 millions here, but even more than that, or less than that. So you can see that very easily you create a lot of this in the language of Solara is called models, cross-product between design options and scenarios. And after you created this is kind of an input stage. You click on this simulate, and then, like I said, a job is sent to the cloud and on Amazon cloud, and you benefit from running all the simulations in a couple of minutes, because they have a high grid of CPUs. Okay, so let me now focus on how we did this. We did have, with this compound, a phase 2 study. In that phase 2 study, we evaluated different doses, and we looked at different effect on the middle dose, safety on the high dose, lack of effect on the lower dose. And based on that data, we created kind of a prior, what might be the treatment effect in phase 3 study. And that prior is highlighted here on the bottom. You see, if it's very dark, that means that scenario, which is one vertical here, has high probability of being likely or true. If you move to the extreme, this would be very small hazard ratios. So that is going up to 0.5. And yes, it's not zero that you'll get there, but very low. And also, you have to put into the likelihood of this priors, also that the drug doesn't work. And you go, I think up to here is hazard ratio 1. Oh, sorry. But you can also consider that now your drug may be harmful. So you go even hazard ratio is greater than 1. So that is where you generate different assumptions of the hazard ratios. And hazard ratios are here, right? Going from, like I said, 0.5 to 1.1, I guess. But you put different likelihood of those scenarios, because you will see that as an output of this simulation, I will have 2 levels of the operating characteristics. across all scenarios, and then I can narrow down on a specific scenario. And in the language of Solara, that means you have to pick up some favorite scenarios. So here I have this one. This column corresponds to hazard ratio 0.8. This one to very optimistic hazard ratio 0.7, and this one 0.75. So 0.8, it was predicted from phase 2 that probably is the most likely. But there is a belief that, yes, the drug has potential to be even 0.7. Now, if you just take only this in consideration, you may either plan a very straightforward design powering for hazard ratio 0.8, but that will require a lot of subjects. Or you take the risk and bite the bullet and say, I plan for hazard ratio of 0.7. But of course, that would be requiring less subjects, but where is the guarantee that you will be successful? Probably the power will be lower. So after I set up all this, I want to spend some time about explaining you how Solara is optimizing or looking for appropriate design. It's not taking just power as a one objective, but is looking in this triangle, right? And usually they call study duration is crucial, sample size or cost is crucial, and then probability of winning. And what you do when you set up the inputs for this kind of simulation run, you have to say, what are the weights that you as a team put on these three objective functions? And you can see here, the team decided to put 40% of the weight on the guaranteeing that you have good probability of winning, and then 30-30 for the others. Now, this is one optimization approach of the different designs. And another one, which is also implemented in Solara, is this through ENPV. ENPV, roughly speaking, is exactly an objective function that is comprising all this cost, duration, and probability of success in one metric. And then, instead of comparing designs in three-dimensional space, you can compare design in just ENPV space. Okay? So I don't see the chat, but I hope that there are no questions. If you have some clarifying questions, I will be more than happy to stop and give you clarifying questions. If there are no questions, I can now go and illustrate the simulation results. Any questions? Okay, if no, then it means that I am very clear in my presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, so here is in a table format, the simulation of these 4 potential designs that have been highlighted, and they are illustrated here on the top here. You see it's called favorites. After doing exploration, I pick up the favorite design, and they are described here. Sample size estimation, planning upfront to enroll 10,000 subjects and have a futility. The second one, which is coming next in the robustness score, is you plan for 12,000 subjects to enroll. You have sample size estimation. You can go up to 16,000, but you don't have futility. This one is group sequential. You plan maximum 14,000, but you have 2 interims. And this one is you go also to 14,000, but you have just 1 interim with either efficacy or futility. And you can see that if you look at the blue, that means it's very good. So this design performed very well under the very optimistic hazard ratio. You remember hazard ratio moving here gives I'm simulating on the very effective scenario. If I move in this direction, none of the design give me good performance because the study is not powered or doesn't have in order to detect a very small hazard ratio. Let's say not small, large, close to 1.9 something. Okay, so let me sip coffee from University of Georgia can. And let me move to the next slide. So I am providing you this table, and let me walk you through the table. So you can see here vertically are these 4 designs that we picked up, and now I can look at the different numerical characteristics of those designs. What is on the top? Yes, a question? I don't know. Maybe somebody is answering the phone. I'll continue if you don't have a question. So the first one is, like I told you, if you look across all scenarios, what is on the average performance of a given design? And one such metric is this called robustness score. High robustness score is very good. So you can see that if I just focus on that as a metric of performance, this design, sample size estimations with 10,000, is giving me the highest score. But that's not the only metric that I have to judge, because if I look at probability of success with the design across all scenario, you can see that there is this scenario and that scenario which has higher probability of success. And I also can average ENPVs, and then weighted or average ENPV also has different kind of indication which design is the best, because this one has the maximum ENPV. But that is, like I said, you get this on overall summary of all scenarios. But you can pick one of those scenarios. You remember these vertical columns corresponding to hazard ratio 0.7 to hazard ratio 0.75. The numbers here correspond in green, and hazard ratio 0.8. And now you can see head-to-head comparison of or performance of each design under those assumptions, right? And you can see that the score decreases if I move hazard ratio from 0.7 to 0.80. You can also see another here, that average study duration also is going down for all of them. This is like all the design will have this type of performance. Why that is the case? Because design is adaptive, and if the hazard ratio, true hazard ratio, is 0.8, the design will try to push to the maximum sample size, if you like, right? Then you can go exactly the same for the power, average number of events, and also these ENPVs. Now, for given design, I can, different scenarios, either red or green or let's say blue, you can see here, if I look at, assume the drug is wonder drug, hazard ratio 0.7, then which design gives me the best return on investment, okay? If you want to use that terminology. This design, and you may guess why. Because this design is planned to enroll only 10,000. In ENPV, the cost per subject is a considerable, contribution. If you have more subjects, you lose more because you have to subtract the cost. Another one is planning for the good design. You don't need to go probably to 14,000 or 12,000 because drug works very well under hazard ratio 0.7. So you will not prolong the duration of the study. You will be increasing the number of patent, exclusivity, which will give you the market share. And so that is an illustration of this. If you go down, let's say on a, base assumption, 0.75, you can see that you drop, but this design still maintains the best ENPV, right? And even under the third one is giving you I can ask you to guess which design was selected by the team. Of course, we can guide them to think about the power, to think about everything else. Of course, they looked at the money and they said, okay, let's go with this one because it's a good compromise, right? So, but that is not going to be always the case. It's not that ENPV should drive us. The score, this robustness score, or the score, is another way of putting the weights on these three metrics that I mentioned to you on this one, and come up with what is average score, this point here. And of course, under different weights, you can get different scores. And you can easily show the team what will be the impact of the score if I move my priorities or weights from, let's say, putting a lot of bet on the power of the study at the cost of a larger number of subjects. Solara also has a lot of plots, nice plots, and I just don't want to spend too much time going through each of them, but just to highlight. For example, this one is how the score of different design will be depending on what is the hazard ratio. So if hazard ratio is 0.8, you can see that the scores will be aligned like this, and this design, which is green, is showing the highest score. This is why also in the ENPV, it was a winner, right? This design corresponds to this efficacy and futility, and you see that it's spending a lot of time and is losing in the score because it's very ambitious one. Okay, if I look at this one, is showing me the relationship between, for example, on this one is duration of the study, and this is the power attained. And this design is the design which is saying enroll only 10,000. If the data will be pessimistic, probably you'll have to increase the number of subjects and duration of the study. And because of that, you know very well that the power of the overall survival test is driven not so much by number of subjects, but by number of events. If I have 10,000 subjects, for me to accumulate the number of events would be much more difficult than the design, which is this design, which is for 14,000 upfront. So I put upfront a lot of subjects and events will come faster. But is that something that you want to focus on, right? And the same is on this one and this one. You can see that this one, which is the blue, is a good compromise. So that's a way of explaining the team how you have this trade-off between one objective versus another. This one, you can see the power of these designs are not very different. They are kind of fine-tuned to have almost the same power on the range of assumed hazard ratios. But let's say on the average number of events, you can see now a difference. This one here is one which corresponds to sample size estimation with 12,000 and no futility. In this region is exactly where futility probably would help, because you will say, oh, drug doesn't have a chance to be successful, I will stop for futility. But this design doesn't allow futility. And it's highlighted on this graph. Be careful, because in that region, this design may be a loser. This other design may be a better compromise. And then this ENPV, which I showed you again in this region, when the drug works very well, yes, you can say that this one, the green one, is on the top, but then in the range between 75 and 85, they both drop, all of them drop, and then over here is a negative ENPV. So you see 0 is here. If indeed it will be the true treatment is in this region, you will not make money, you will lose money.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
Quick question, like about the like the power slides. What's the metric for, like, it says average duration? Like, how do you like measure duration? Like, I'm kind of just confused because simulation.
Power and duration?
Yeah, like what? Like how's
probably
duration
this one, right?
Yeah.
Power and duration. So it's a two-dimensional plot, which is through the simulation is showing what will be, let's say, the design, which is this one. You remember, this is the one which is having go to 14,000 from the beginning. I can show you this one, you see, and have efficacy and futility. That design has very high power, right? When the hazard ratio is 0.7, the power is 99.9, because the design was focused to have even on the hazard ratio of 0.8 to have about 90% power. And you see it's there, but you don't know what will be the hazard ratio, right? So this design then, of course, because you start with very large number of subjects, you will accumulate events very fast. And this is why the duration, which is on this scale, for that design is very low. This one is a design with 10,000, right? Sample size estimation. If I enroll only 10,000, and probably the design will not ask for more because hazard ratio is very good, of course, I will have still to wait until those 10,000 will give me number of events. Power is good, is 99.6, but of course, I lose on duration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I am close to finishing. Let me put the last slide. So you saw it. So I think that this is an illustration that, yes, indeed, with this platform, we have different benefits on being able to explore a wide space of design options, have an opportunity on the same platform, compare and contrast different design options, which is different that you have your design, you run simulations, I run my design, I run my simulations, and then we come and say, can we compare? First of all, it's not guaranteed that we simulated both design under the same conditions. Here you lock them. All design apply to the same simulation scenario. So it's a fair comparison, if you like, right? And also is impactful because it's giving the teams this opportunity to explore a lot of different options, quickly make some changes if you feel that something doesn't look good, maybe drop some of the options, add other options, and so on. It's a very collaborative framework in order to plan for clinical trials. So, and then conclusion, simulation-guided clinical trial design in general, not necessarily Solara, is a good framework to consider in order to explore different design options, especially in this complex, innovative design space. At Johnson & Johnson, we build this culture of simulation-guided model-informed drug development, and I think that gives us a good, I don't know, advantage, if you like, in order to get to the best design in comparison with, let's say, somebody else from other companies which don't have this opportunity. So I encourage everybody to consider this type, and students from the University of Georgia or somebody else, if you consider to continue your, I don't know, career in pharmaceutical industry, I want you to know through this presentation that we are not just doing a very trivial, I call them vanilla designs of clinical trials. We are very innovative, and we have good tools in order to sort this objective of multi-criterial, multi-objective clinical trials. With that, I will stop. I think that, I don't know if you read questions. I don't see the questions. Yeah, can you maybe open? I don't know, how do you want to do it? You open the line, they unmute themselves. Tell me.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very nice talk. If there was any question, just feel free to voice up. I don't think there was anything in the chat, so no worry.
Okay, and like Ting told you at the beginning, the slides, I agree that the slides can be distributed. I think that Ting recorded. So feel free to use this presentation. And if you have questions, reach out to me, and I will be more than happy to answer some follow-up questions if you have any.
Vlad, may I ask
Yes.
questions?
Sure.
Hi, this is Yajin from Georgia Tech. This is more than the UGA. It's more like from Georgia, kind of ASA-Georgia chapter. So very interesting talk, and sorry I missed the first half of your talk. So I'm very interesting talk. I really like the way you use the simulations and the guided clinical trial design. So my comments or questions, or maybe say your comments on the in your company J&J, for the adaptive design, so what's the default for your choice on the fidelity boundary? I know given the fidelity boundary, you can do in the simulations, but I want to say, understand what's the industry golden standard or the default value, the default boundary for the fidelity analysis.
Yeah, very good question. I think that there are now many options how to build the futility rule. And I think it's good that we have different options, because it's not that one rule will be the best across all possible situations. So the most used one is based on conditional power. So conditional power at the interim analysis, you look at the data and you say, if the trend that I observed so far will be the same for the rest of the trial, and I know how many subjects I plan to enroll, what will be the probability that I will be successful? And usually you put a threshold on that conditional power. If you are lower than that, then you stop for futility, or you trigger futility rule. There are some now recognized drawbacks of this rule, because depends on some assumptions, right? When you calculate this conditional power, you have to say under what assumptions, under the trend, or under the pre-planned treatment effect. Now, sometimes when we start the study, we don't know what will be the treatment effect. And moreover, if you also have sample size estimation, calculating conditional power on the pre-planned effect doesn't make sense, because sample size estimation is specifically invented when you don't know at the planning stage what is the treatment effect. So in that case, usually we have different other options. Either you calculate predictive power, you take into consideration some prior knowledge about treatment effect, very similar like it was here. You remember I used this futility, but averaged across a scenario. And there is another one, yeah, John, probably you know that at the NIH conference yearly, I presented something that we are now deploying. It's called conditional assurance rule in order to build the futility rule. There is another one in the framework of group sequential designs, which is called, you have alpha spending rule, but you can have beta spending rule. And then the beta spending rule may be a good implementation of futility. If you cross that boundary, then you stop for futility. So like I said, there are many options. It's good that we have many options, but it's good then to have this type of tools in order to easily compare and contrast different futility rules. I focus now only find me the best futility rule. So that is exactly a good framework to do this type of exercise.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Hope to see you in person sometimes. So.
Yes, definitely. Looking forward. Anybody else?
Yes, hi Vlad. Thank you very much for the great talk. This is Alex. I have a question.
Alex.
Hi, good.
Are you in Georgia? I didn't know that you are in Georgia.
No, I'm remote. I'm listening remotely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really lucky that I was able to see the announcement. So my question is, have you considered doing any type of automation using maybe machine learning driven type of algorithms, so that you basically pre-specify the characteristics that you would like to achieve, and then the computer is trying to find those?
Yeah, I think that in the latest version of Solara 1.5, they are trying to implement this type of artificial intelligence. You can see quickly that although this is a real problem from a real trial, through this multitude of scenarios and design options, you quickly land into the multi-big data situation. And you have so many options to look. Now they implemented, it's called, you set up the simulations, you get the result, and then you ask to the computer to find you the best designs. Yeah. So it's a step forward, Alex, into that direction, but it's not really, it's more like a search for different design given a set of operating characteristics. And then they will screen many of the designs that have been evaluated that do not satisfy this. That's one opportunity. You narrow down quickly the set of designs, or even they will, you set up what are the major objectives in your objective function that you have to focus and is picking up some of those designs. In the plot that I showed here, I think that they plot them. If I go to this one, is already illustrated. You see, there are my design, which are hearts, but there are these designs. You see, these are exactly the designs. If I want an objective to reduce the number of subjects or minimize the number of subjects, that is the design, which is not even, I was not simulating it, right? This design is the one which minimizes the duration of the study. You see, it's the circle here. So they already are moving into this direction of recognizing that you end up with a big data situation, how to navigate through it. But the big difference, Alex, I know that at the University of Georgia, you have a lot of experts in design of experiments, which is also my area of expertise and fun area. I think that the difference between approach in Solara from other design of experiments, we are struggling to do constrained design of experiments, and everybody knows that that is a very tough problem. What Solara is doing unconstrained optimization, or I simulate all possible combinations. I don't care about controlling type 1 error. I don't care about controlling power. And then I get all this big data, and then through this screening, I rule out quickly the designs which, for example, have power smaller than 80%. I'm not interested in those designs. You see? And computationally, beside the fact that they are running it on the cloud, is this optimization problem is so easy because it's like enumeration, right? You go and enumerate everything.
That's exactly what my question was. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other question? All right, if there was no other question, let's thank Vlad for the very nice talk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm just gonna end the recording.